Obviously, Indra didn't hire me because of my design background, but mostly because I showed her that I had this sensitivity and this ability to think that what I needed to do at PepsiCo was to design culture before anything else.
Hello, I'm Doug Powell. Welcome to This is a Prototype, the Design Leadership Podcast. My guests in this episode are two legendary design leaders, Anne Willoughby and Mauro Porcini. Anne Willoughby is an AIGA medalist who has been a leading voice in design for over 5 decades. In 1978, she founded Willoughby Design, one of the first woman-owned design firms in the U.S. In addition to her leadership of this award-winning firm, Anne has been an advocate for countless community organizations and academic programs throughout her career. Mauro Porcini is the first ever Chief Design Officer of PepsiCo, where he is infusing design thinking into PepsiCo's culture and leading a new approach to innovation by design that is impacting the company's vast portfolio of products and brands. Mauro is also the author of the book, The Human Side of Innovation, The Power of People in Love with People. Before I get into my discussion with Anne and Mauro, I want to share a few minutes of a conversation I had recently with Professor Omari Souza, founder of the State of Black Design Conference, which is happening for the first time ever as a live in-person event next March 15th and 16th in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been a huge fan of this conference and the vibrant community of designers of color that has formed around it since its inception in 2020. Professor Souza shared with me the backstory of how the State of Black Design came to be.
Yeah, so this happened, I want to say in 2019, 2020. I was teaching at Texas State University, a little bit south of Austin in San Marcos, Texas. I was one of, I believe, 80 faculty members in the College of Art and Design at that university, but happened to be the only Black tenure-track faculty member that was there. So when the murder of George Floyd happened, it was a lot of conversations with colleagues around what is it that we can do, many of which the eyes went to me. Texas State University is a majority minority institution, Hispanic serving institution. And for me, it was really important to make space for designers to talk about issues that were important to them, especially considering in 2019, 2020, there weren't many conferences that were featuring Black and brown faces on their conference lineups. A lot of the feedback we would get when questioning those organizations is that there weren't enough Black designers, there weren't enough qualified Black designers. So I, rather than arguing the issue, wanted to kind of showcase that there were. So I gathered 13 friends of mine. Some of them include Maurice Sherry, host of the Revision Path podcast, Jacinda Walker, Teresa Moses, who is the co-editor on the book, The Anthology of Blackness, Antoinette Carroll, and what we thought would have just been an audience of 100 Texas State students ended up being 5,000 people that tuned in, predominantly in the United States, but a few sprinkles of attendees in Europe, Africa, and Canada.
That original one was fully virtual, right?
Fully virtual. I mean, we still remain scrappy. Every year that we do this, we're doing it with the intent of keeping the costs down for the attendees. A number of the folks that I've invited to speak may be the only Black person in their firm, in their department. And there are a lot of nuances that goes into being the only one that many people, if you've never done it, have never experienced. So when you get a bunch of these people into the same room to talk, a lot of times it's a safe space that they've never had before. So a lot of the conversations are a bit more open and vulnerable. We are going to be hosting in 2024 in Nashville, Tennessee, on the campus of Tennessee State University, which is a historically Black university. It's one of 3 in Nashville, so it makes it uniquely situated. It puts us 4 hours from Memphis, 4 hours from Atlanta, 5 to 6 hours from the Carolinas and Virginia, as well as a 6 to 7 hour drive from Chicago. So it puts us in a region where we can tap into a large swath of our targeted demographic. We are always looking for sponsorship and partnerships. The more that we're able to raise is the more that we're able to provide to the community at large, and the lower the expense falls on them. But yeah, we are always looking for companies to come and recruit at the career fair. We are always looking for companies that are interested in doing activations. assist us with, post-conference events like welcome parties, after-event parties, things of that nature, or just networking opportunities. If you have any questions about sponsorship, you can reach out to us via the website, thesobd.com, just an acronym for the stateofblackdesign.com, or you can email me at info@thesobd.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn and just shoot me an inbox message. I'll respond.
That's Professor Omari Souza, founder of the State of Black Design Conference, which is happening next March 15th and 16th in Nashville, Tennessee. Registration will be opening very soon. I'll put a link to more information on my LinkedIn post for this episode. Now let's get to my conversation with Anne Willoughby and Mauro Porcini. Of course, I love to hear the origin stories of how my guests discovered design, and Anne Willoughby starts us off with her story.
We have to go back to the Louisiana Purchase in 1804, but I won't go back that far. But my family is from Mississippi, and I grew up in a little town called Raymond, and I was a very curious little kid. And early on, I had a real interest in, I guess it would be what we would call anthropology now, in history and culture. I love to build things with my hands. And of course, like every other little kid, I love to draw. And that really took me all the way through high school into college. Like all other kids, I was the art student that drew for everyone. But in college, I got a job working for this remarkable man named Milton Waldorf. And he taught me all about retail. And I became a fashion illustrator for his newspaper in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And that was the very beginning of my career.
That is so interesting. How did he find you, or how did you find him? That seems so serendipitous to me.
Well, when I got to college, my father's check bounced. He's gone, so I can say that. So I either had to go home or get a job. So I went to downtown Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and I saw a little guy in a window doing window dressing. I talked him into hiring me. Melted across the street, who had a nicer store, saw my windows and followed me to the bus stop one day and asked if I'd come and work for him. And I did for the next 3 years.
Oh, my goodness.
So I started off doing windows and then merchandising and then the advertising for the paper.
So you had kind of a competitive bidding going for your early design skills, right?
That, and I was obviously desperate.
Right. Mauro, take us back to your origin story and tell us, what was the original doorway for you as a designer?
Well, family also for me. My father was an architect, but he's been painting all his life. His passion was painting. Still today, in his late 70s, he's still doing it every single day. My mother was somehow forced by the events of life to work in finance, but she hated it. She left her job when she was 38, and she went after her passion, that was writing. And she also loved reading and literature and philosophy. And I don't know if it's because of them or just because of the way I was and what I loved to do in life. Writing and painting were my passions too. So I wanted to be either an author, a writer, or an artist. The problem is that I was coming from a family that was not very wealthy, a very humble family. So it was a miracle already they were able to send me to college, to university. By the way, public university, so it's free. But for 5 years, I was not going to have a job. And so out of university, I needed to find a job. And in Italy back then, to find a job as an author or to find a job as an artist, it was not going to be that easy. So very pragmatic decision was the one of studying architecture. That was somehow close to the world of art, humanistic. And then few days before doing the test to enter architecture, a friend of mine from high school called me and he told me, there is this new faculty, by the way, within the Politecnico University of Milan that had architecture, engineering. They were creating this new faculty called design, industrial design. Actually, it was called in Italian, disegno industriale. And I don't know, somehow it sounds a little bit like art, but there was with the word disegno, that means drawing in Italy. And then there was industrial, so the commerce, it was more pragmatic, more opportunities to find a job. So I was like, you know what? Let's try this thing. I did a test and I arrived first out of thousands of people. God knows how and why. But that was for me a sign. I was like, maybe this is my thing. But I literally started the university thinking I was going to study the way to design industrial machines for, the industry. And then in few months, I discovered that that was my dream university, my dream school, teaching you to observe people, human beings, and create amazing solutions to their needs, wants, dreams. And I didn't know there was a university, a school that would teach you something like this. And so I spent the rest of my life, still today, to be an ambassador of this amazing war that is called design, because many people still today have no clue of what design is. And so I have so many sons and daughters of executives of this company and people that come to the design center of PepsiCo. They come here intrigued because they know a little bit of what we're doing, and then they get out of this, design center, and they decide to actually study design. Many sons and daughters of executives of PepsiCo are designers today because they got exposed to something that they didn't know it existed. There are so many people out there that don't know that design is an amazing job and you can have a career in this field.
Right. Well, it's so interesting that you talk about the language of design and the word design, and I won't even try to say it in Italian. You said it so beautifully. And back to your story, I'm wondering, were you even talking about it as design at the time, the work that you were doing in retail and in the store windows? Was that the word that you would use at that time?
I had a sense of it because my then boss loved Stanley Marcus. And Stanley Marcus at that time was inventing Neiman Marcus, which was in Dallas. I mean, I got an idea of what it was all about in fashion, although that wasn't my passion, but I became passionate about it. And then I moved to Kansas City and found that portfolio got me offers at Macy's and the upscale stores and everything, because I'd been doing full-page ads in the Hattiesburg American. And, of course, it looked like they were in the New York Times. So I had a great job at Macy's. And I got to work, believe it or not, with an art director named Patty Kirtley, who had worked at Neiman's. And it was just one of those magical moments when the fashion illustration, this was in the late 60s. So it was really, really still, a big deal back then. And so that's how I started my career. But I'll end it with something kind of interesting. Within, I'd say 6 months, the entire country started using photography instead of illustration. We were Macy's Midwest. There were 3 Macy's art departments. And there were 30 people in our department. One woman illustrated fur, and one did girdles, and one did tire. Somebody else did, linen. Everything was illustrated. And one day they said, it's going to be cheaper to go to photography. And Dad and some other things, I was out of a job.
Put us in time there, Anne.
This would have been around 1970-ish.
Wow.
It took several years for the high fashion to go away, but the illustration, finally everybody was doing photography because it was just, it was just less expensive.
Another kind of pivot point in the technology of design.
Beginning of my company at that point.
I think there is an interesting lesson in your story. Many designers today are afraid of what AI could do to many of our jobs, right? It's just a moment to be flexible, embrace the newness of this new technology, and just reinvent yourself eventually and evolve yourself. And, you had an amazing career as a successful designer, no matter the disruption in what you are doing.
That's what she did. This is kind of interesting.
These are opportunities to really find your way and understand how to innovate in a specific field, in a specific territory. no matter the technology, but actually sometimes leveraging new technologies in creative ways.
I really agree with you. And in fact, I've been using some of those analogies recently with some of the people I'm mentoring and some business relationships. I mean, every single time there's a disruption like this, there are opportunities, and you just have to look and see where they are. And they're there every single time.
And you mentioned the woman who you worked with, the art director.
Her name was Patty Kirtley.
And what an important figure and an unexpected, figure she must have been in your career.
Here's what she did. This is kind of interesting. Macy's was not, almost the entire department finally left. And so I began to start a business. When I was just leaving Macy's, she somehow talked our, head of our department into sending us to the Aspen Design Conference. And this would have been in, I think, 72 or 3. I mean, we were winding down big time. And so we went. And I remember standing with her, and she said, "That's Milton Glaser." And I said, "Who's he?" And Patty said, "He did the Bob Dylan poster." Oh, now I know who he is. And so, with the conference line, and toward the end, he introduced himself to me. And I said, "Well, hello, how are you?" I didn't really know exactly who he was. But he was very kind, and we exchanged phone numbers. That's what you did back then. And so we began to talk on the phone. And that's how another part of my career got started.
Let's put a pin in that one, because there's more to that story. I know that continued on for many, many years. Mauro, let's talk about the people in your early career who were pivotal. Were there any figures who had that kind of, sort of unexpected influence on you in your early years as a designer?
Yes, for sure. And I'm glad you're asking this question, because they've been so important for me that I dedicated 2 entire chapters to them in my book. One, it was the head of design of Philips. So back then, Philips Design, Stefano Marzano, an Italian working in the Netherlands. And what he did, it was not something big, a big learning or something that he taught me. It's something small, but that literally changed my life. Essentially, I met him through a friend of a friend when I was still 18. And I was really at the beginning of my design journey. Maybe I was 19, a few months into design school. And this friend of mine told me that his father knew Stefano Marzano, this famous designer. I knew about Stefano already at school. Everybody was talking about him. So long story short, she tells me, when he comes to Italy and he comes to our family, I'll make sure I call you and you can meet him. So a few months later, it happened, and I go and meet this guy, and I'm totally fascinated by his passion and what he was doing and his vision for changing the tech industry through design. And so I started to follow him, actually almost to stalk him. Back then there were not social media, so I was in love with the world of philosophy. I wanted to be a writer, a philosopher. So as a philosopher, I started to write him letters that I sent to the Netherlands, talking about design and what design can do, and he never answered to, those letters. I probably sent him 2 or 3 letters like this over a couple of years. But then he did something that really literally changed my life, a little act of kindness. He took 2 books that he published with Philips Design. He had them in English and in Italian. He picked the English ones. I didn't speak a word of English because I studied French at school. He knew, because when we met, he asked me if I would speak English, and he told me it's necessary if you ever want to join Philips in the future or want to work in big corporations. But again, we're talking about the late, mid-90s. In Italy, it was not necessary to speak English to have a great career in design. So it was not, it's not today. So long story short, he sent me these 2 books all the way to this little town in Italy with a dedication. And I still have the books and the dedication. He wrote me, I have these books also in Italian, but I'm sending them in English to you because it's so important for you to learn English. And that was really the pivotal moment because my family never took a plane, never left Italy. Nobody before then really pushed me to study English, to understand how important English was for my career. Because of this guy that had a different perspective in life, had a different experience, was different than my family, my experience and everything. Because of him, because I admire him, because I consider him a distant mentor, I decided to take a leap of faith, leave everything, and apply for a scholarship to go study design, because I didn't have the money to go study English. I studied design with an exchange program in Dublin. And I won this scholarship and I went. And it was not easy because I had to do the exams, the design exams at college level in a language that I didn't speak. I had 6 months to learn the language. Somehow, I studied a little bit before leaving, but again, and I didn't have a penny when I was there. And I couldn't work as a waiter or the normal jobs that you do as a student because I didn't speak the language. So I found a job in the cafeteria of the school to clean dishes in the cafeteria of the school to get some money to survive there. And that literally changed my life. First, yes, because I learned English and now I'm speaking in English with you, my broken Italian English. But then also because that was the first time that I had an experience for months, for almost a year outside of Italy. And that changed completely my perspective on Italy, on myself, on my community, my culture. I understood things that I was taking for granted about the culture, the strengths of the culture, the weaknesses of the culture. I became more critical about those weaknesses that I didn't see before. And I started to celebrate things that we Italians were taken for granted and instead were unique and great. And so, again, I realized the importance of diversity of thinking, changing perspective. It has been magic. Now, I don't want to steal too much of your time, so that's one mentor. There is another one, maybe another time.
We'll pick that up. I want to hear about the other mentor.
You've said something just now that I so wholly believe, and that is one person can do one thing that can change your life. And that kind of goes along with what we were talking about. Something ends sometimes, and there's something else that opens up. But there are these little things that happen along, if I can look back on my life, just like that. Somebody did something, and it changed my life. So,
I mean, as you are saying this, I close the chapter saying exactly this. Two magic things happen in the moment. Trying to send a message, especially to everybody, but especially to the young people. Two magic things happen. One is that the super busy person decided to do a little act of kindness. It didn't take too much time for him to take those books, write the dedication, and ask his assistant to send them. But still, it did take an effort and time. A lot of people wouldn't do it. The second thing that happened is that the young kid was there, curious and hunting for mentors and hunting for inspiration and harassing people to get that inspiration. And so the message for the people out there today is this. For the people looking for inspiration, go and find your mentors, your role models. And now with social media, we have access to so many inspiring people. Write to them, try to connect. And then for the people that somehow, made it or been successful, carve out a little time, maybe in social media, to answer the messages of people writing to you. It may be enough one sentence, and you can change the life of people. And so I've been forcing myself to try to answer as much as possible to the many people that write. I have hundreds of thousands of followers across social media platforms. It's not easy, but I do an effort. And you have no idea how many times over the past many years, people wrote me, maybe years later, writing me, you know what, because of what you told me that day, or I changed my job. I took a chance, and now I'm doing this. And this, oh my God, I mean, I have goosebumps talking about this. It gives me so much energy. It gives me the feeling that I'm giving back and I'm helping other people. And if there was more kindness in the world and more openness to interact and give feedback, probably we will live in a world that is very different than what we're witnessing today.
That's so beautiful. And one of the things that surprised me the most about this series is that I've been having these conversations with leaders is the consistent theme of generosity. If you would have asked me before I started doing this series, what would be the themes of leadership? What would be the big ideas of leadership? I never would have thought that generosity and kindness, as you put it, Mauro, would be literally the top idea that everyone brings up. It's so interesting. And I know that either that first encounter with Milton or shortly thereafter, that you were having a crisis with your own business. You weren't sure if you could be successful with it. You were questioning whether you would continue, and Milton really had a role in encouraging you. Do you want to share that story with us?
Sure. I think this was very true of women back at that time, and still is to a certain extent, but it was really unique. At that moment, in smaller towns like Kansas City, most firms were more like art studios that supported advertising agencies. And I didn't really want to do that because I had already seen what Milton was doing. And I wanted to open a studio, and he really gave me the help to do that and the moral courage and kindness, because I had 2 little children and I was trying to juggle the children and the work and starting a studio. And he was there along with a lot of other people. So it gave me the courage to take what's, knowledge and skills I had, which were pretty limited at that point. I'd never run a business or anything. And really sort of create something out of whole cloth. I just invented a place I wanted to work. And it worked, and it's still going. I sold it. I sold it a few years ago, but it's still going really well. But boy, did I learn a lot. And some of my best lessons were working with people like Mauro. Like when I was able to work with like Gordon McKenzie, who was kind of head of design or one of the design folks at Hallmark. He wrote a book called Orbiting the Giant Hairball, which became a great business book back in the early 2000s. And, I was able to work with some of these people like you and Doug at IBM. And I so admired those skills because they were, I was pretty good at working with, my company, and we were very successful. But I was just blown away at the variety of large design institutions or then companies, and just how different they were. And I've heard, many of your stories, Doug. What a challenge for a designer. What an opportunity. And you really are design leaders.
We are, and inclusive of you, absolutely. Mauro, you were mentioning another mentor, another key figure who was important to you. Would you like to reveal the mystery mentor to us?
He's another Italian. His name is Claudio Cecchetto. He was a big Italian celebrity in the music industry and in television. So imagine, like, I don't know, Jay-Z, Madonna here in the US, the level of celebrity in my country. And I met him, again, come from a little town in Italy, zero connection, no network, no money, nothing. And again, a friend of a friend, same situation once again. The idea was go and have a drink with a guy. Or, back then, somebody could have gone and get an autograph. Today, you will get a selfie and post it in your social media channel. And instead, I decided to go with a couple of friends, designers from school, and propose him a project. We knew that he was investing in the world of digital. Digital was just starting, was the end of the 90s, the world of internet. He was producing many other famous singers, and he was intrigued by the world of digital, supporting them, but mostly wanted to try new ventures in the world and understand exactly what you could do if you could do business in the world. And so we go and we propose him a project. I still have the printouts of what we proposed to him. Essentially, the idea of a city, he was managing different internet sites. Imagine that that internet site became a city in 3 dimensions, but obviously it was flat with the technology back then. But it was a literal city where you could go to the square, you could go to the bank, you could go to different buildings. essentially the idea of the metaverse today, but flat. He got really excited by the potential of these kids. That's what he's been doing all his life, finding potential in people and launching people also under his label and everything. And he proposed us to build a company together. And so here we started a dream for us as kids. And we start to work on the digital content of many of these music celebrities, singers, blah, blah, blah. But then I remember him, especially at the beginning of this journey, telling us all the time, I don't care at all about doing, the internet site of the digital content of the CD of these singers or the image of these singers. What I want to do is to create something that nobody ever created before. He was obsessed every time he was doing something with doing something new. In the little things, in the big things. Essentially, in other words, he told me to be an innovator. He told me really how an innovator thinks, acts, behaves, the obsessions of innovation. And the guy never in his life used the word innovation. If you would put the guy in IBM, in PepsiCo, in our companies, he would never be able to talk about innovation. It's not part of his vocabulary, but he's been the best innovator, one of the best innovators I've been working with in my entire life. He told me really, this obsession for creating something new, unique, and different, starting from real, concrete, pragmatic needs and wants of people. And that's why I did innovation even before myself, I could define what I was doing as innovation. It was just the normal way of thinking and behaving. And I celebrate this so much even in the book, because I'm so allergic to so many people that we meet today that are so eloquent in talking about innovation, and they talk about processes and strategies and ways of working, and they're so good at talking about this, but then they have no idea of how to make it happen. And we need more and more and more people that really, they have it inside, they know how to drive it. And then, yes, you need the processes and the tools, but you need the people behind those processes and those tools. And too many times these companies invest too much time, resources in defining those processes and tools, and not in really defining the culture, the mindset you need to drive innovation the proper way. The processes and tools are like a brush. Put the brush in the hands of Picasso, put it in the hands of a little kid or your commercial accountant. The results will be very different. So let's really focus on Picasso more than on the brush.
I love that, and I love the idea. We'll circle back on this in a moment. The idea of culture in a big organization, especially, and I've worked in big organizations, Mauro, and how important that can be. We'll get back to that momentarily. And I want to pick up with you as your business grew, as Willoughby Design grew and evolved. I imagine in those years your role changed from hands-on, doing design every day, making, probably drawing, creating, to more tactical leadership roles. And I wonder if I've got that right, and B, if there were things that you had to learn along that part of the journey that were not in your bag of tricks, were not in your toolkit when you started the business.
That is a great question. Well, here's how I describe that. We were so lucky from day one to have when I was even freelancing, I had a giant international client, Lee Jeans, which we worked with them for almost 5 decades. How about that? And we worked with Hallmark, and we had really large clients. So most of them were national and some were international. And then we had a lot of smaller startups. And what I noticed is that every company had a different DNA. And I began early to think about those principles and values and lessons. So I kind of set it up for Willoughby. This was something we wrote down and sort of been our whole thing. If a company can establish a place where people belong and they have a sense of purpose, and you can create trust, establish values, rituals, and you can manage that, you can change. You can create a culture where people can change, excel, and innovate. But if you can't get that company right, it's very hard for them, and I'm talking about Willoughby now, to co-create and really generate value to our clients. And so by working with a lot of these real small startups, like it was a bagel company that became Einstein Bagels, working with Gail, and this was back in the 90s, late 80s. We were racing Starbucks to have this fast casual idea. And then I was working with Science Diet and Hills, which is international pet company, for this huge design team to roll out this new product. And as soon as we did, they succeeded, and Colgate took over, and they brought in their European folks. And so then I found this little company and helped them create Three Dog Bakery. But I had a ton of experience working with an international pet care company. So somehow with these giant clients and these tiny clients, we created a mix where we could really do some innovative things, but keeping our company invested and in attracting the best possible people and training.
Interesting that you saw how important those values and principles were, and instilling those in Willoughby Design. Mauro, I know in your career, I'm thinking back to your time at 3M as the first chief design officer at that company, and then the first chief design officer at PepsiCo. You've been the first at a couple of big companies. That suggests to me that there was no playbook for those jobs when you stepped into them. And I imagine that you had to write the book. You have written the book, but you had to almost invent the job in real time.
What a coincidence. I was talking about this with one of the designers in my team right now, and high potential in our team. How in my entire life, all the jobs I had, I never respected my job description. I always created the job description for myself. Obviously, this is obvious when I created my own agency, but then in 3M and then in PepsiCo, obviously I had a job description when I joined the company. But then I literally reinvented the job over time. Now, the two cases, the 3M one and the PepsiCo one, were really different because in the 3M one, first of all, I entered from a junior position inside the organization, and everything was, even for me, to be discovered, to be built and discovered. When I arrived in PepsiCo, at 10 years of experience in building design capabilities in a multinational corporation, so I had somehow that playbook ready. And actually, it's been the topic of my interview with the CEO of PepsiCo back then, with Indra Nui. We talked about how to design, culture of design inside the organization, not how to design products or brands. And so in the first 10 years at 3M, it's been a journey based on intuition, and then learning a lot, and seeing the company, my colleagues in marketing, in R&D, in all the different functions, as my mentors, my teachers, the people to learn from. And then absorbing with great humbleness. That is, I think, is a key word in our world, because often as designers we arrive and we think we figure out everything because we know what we should do and this company should do, and these companies that just don't get it, but we get it. And instead, I learned that if a company was able to generate billions of dollars every year, probably it was something that they were doing right, even though I was thinking that many things were wrong in the way they were designing products and brands and so on and so forth, back then. So long story short, learning, intuition, and then prototyping. We talk about design thinking, this idea of, desirability, viability, feasibility, and then prototyping. Well, you can apply that even to your job description, your position in a company, or the creation of a capability. So I prototype, or in other words, I tried things, and I make many mistakes, but when the things were going well, what did I do? I tried to understand what was working. And when they didn't go well, I tried to understand what was not working. And that's how I started to build the playbook. Putting together the dots of the things that were working, I started to replicate those things and try to scale them up. And step by step, I arrived to define what was the ideal playbook. I arrived even to define the different phases that I went through in 3M to build that culture and to build that capability. 5 different phases that, again, have been the topic of conversation in the interview with Indra Nooyi, the CEO of PepsiCo. And I think have been the key reason why Indra decided to hire a profile of designers that was an anomaly for this industry, because I am an industrial designer that's been working in tech all his life. And all of a sudden, I join a food and beverage company, the industry I never touched in my life, in an industry where usually you have brand designers to lead these organizations, right? So obviously Indra didn't hire me because of my design background, but mostly because I showed her that I had this sensitivity and this ability to think that what I needed to do at PepsiCo was to design culture before anything else.
I love that, and I'd love to pick up that thread. And I saw you nodding your head to a lot of Mauro's comments there. And anything you want to pick up on there?
Just that the culture is one of the most important things in any company. And whenever we've helped startups, we had to learn along with them, but we said part of what we'd love to help you do is design your culture, because if you don't build a culture to support the business, you're not going to be able to sustain it.
And how was that received? I mean, I imagine that wasn't exactly why they invited you in. And when you come in and they're thinking they're going to get a brand and you're saying, we're going to give you culture, how did that go?
It just became part of the branding process, sort of kind. They most of them did not have a very good organizational structure yet. They had not developed systems. I don't know if you ever worked with startups, but one of the things we worked with was with a Kauffman Foundation, and we worked for several years on this thing called Kauffman Labs, where they trained entrepreneurs to go out into the world and so we helped these entrepreneurs, really smart people that had gone to the big schools and everything, how to create their job, how to create their companies. Branding was part of it, but also showing them the other parts of their business that they couldn't neglect, and then helping them put it all together and present it. And that was some of the most satisfying work that we did, because from having a small business myself, I understood that was as important as their idea or their product design or anything, as I didn't have that part of it right. Now, normally that doesn't come from designers, but I have to say, sometimes when I hear other people talk about this, I don't agree with how they frame it very well. Mauro, when people are teaching others about building businesses, I think they overlook the intangible parts of a business, the things that are so important, but you can't measure them.
The human connections.
Yes, absolutely. Which,
Mauro, is the core idea in your wonderful book, The Human Side of Innovation, those connections between people, right?
Well, it's your networks and life that you've established, and how I met you was through AIGA, and we were president, and we tackled the issues of the day back then. But all those networks overlap, and they provide connection and everything. Yeah. Now I'm doing a lot of work with KCAI and also with SVA. I've been a mentor there for a few years. And what you said about mentoring, it has been the joy of my life, working on different levels with people, because now that I'm not working at Willoughby anymore, I find it the most satisfying thing to do. Not just people, but companies, and working with others who are going through those things that I went through, over the past, 50 years.
Yeah. Mauro, I want to get back to the early conversations between you and Indra. It sounded to me like you sort of changed her or expanded her idea of what she thought she was looking for and what she thought she was hiring in the chief design officer. She's so eloquent when she speaks and writes about design, and I'm always just so struck by her clarity of thinking about design for a non-designer, first of all, and a business leader. Do you think she had that broader idea that design can actually be a cultural force in a big company, or did you bring that in to her?
Indra is, because she's still alive, is a very curious person. And she's been talking about all her life about the value of continuous learning, always learning. And she was practicing this. She comes from the world of finance and strategy. And one of the things she bumped into was the world of design. Mostly the episode she always talk about is her encounter with Steve Jobs, her first conversation with Steve Jobs. She was a fresh CEO, and she was meeting, multiple CEOs for some form of mentoring. And Jobs told her that if she was serious about building brands in the world of today, she needed to invest in design. And so what she did, first of all, she reacted to that. She was like, okay, that's an interesting idea. And she started to study and read and document herself and everything. And then she literally prototyped that. She decided to start working directly with some agencies, not delegating this to the teams and everything, but being personally involved. And there were a few things that were done that eventually didn't go very well. Some of them, are pretty public in some collaborations of PepsiCo with some of these external agencies. Until a certain point, she understood that she needed to build a culture from within. It doesn't mean that you're not going to work with agencies. We have hundreds of designers in-house, and we work with hundreds of agencies out there. But it means that design is, before anything else, culture. It's not projects or, things like this. And so she understood that she needed to build a culture from within. But even when she talked to me, and then the first few months after she hired me, she had not a very clear idea of what design was. She knew there was much more than packaging. She was talking about experience. She was talking about culture. But what she really did that is extraordinary, and extraordinary leaders do it all the time, but there are not many extraordinary leaders out there, is to empower people under her and give them the ability, the freedom to really shape, in the case, that initiative, the capability, the culture, leveraging what they're able to do. So essentially, she empowered me to do things. I offer her to come with me to get exposed to this world of design. For instance, we took a plane and we went to meet the CEO of Samsung in Korea, all the way to Korea. We went to meet the CEO of Philips in Holland. We went to meet the CEO of 3M, the company I was coming from. We went to meet top executives in J&J, just to see how other companies were investing in design. Companies that had thousands of designers or hundreds of designers that really embedded the design culture in different ways. With each company, I was pushing a different side of design or a different message for Indra. And then she came with me to Milan Design Week multiple times, and she got exposed to so many designers. And then she even decided to come with me on stage in design conferences where they usually don't see the caliber of CEOs, on stage. And so that was all part of the learning process of Indra to become, this eloquent. There is now an HBR interview about the power of design thinking at PepsiCo. So an interview to her from 2015 that for some reason today, I received so many links today to that. I think that some media outlet repropose it today. But there is a famous article and then an interview to her about design thinking in HBR. And this is an example. The first time I met her, we did talk about the 5 phases that I went through in 3M to build this design culture, leveraging actually design thinking to design culture. And I think that's because she was going through a redesign of the culture of the company that had nothing to do with design. She was building the global organizations, trying to take a decentralized company, transform it in a real global company. And mostly she was driving performance with purpose. So financial performance with purpose, social purpose, sustainability, and so she was in the middle of the redesign of that culture. So when she heard me talking about that and understanding that to introduce design, it was about redesigning the culture, I think we just understood each other right away.
Yeah, lovely. We are, believe it or not, very close to the end of our time here. This has been a fascinating conversation. I think you both, and I want to give you both a short time to pass along any guidance that you would give to a rising design leader, an aspiring leader out there. What would you tell that person, and what's your best nugget of advice?
Well, it's very interesting. It's almost exactly what it was, and that is find a mentor or a sponsor and build your network of people and stay curious. The more you can learn and understand and stay humble. A lifelong learning means that you're ready to change and move with the flow of technology and cultural change. And I think one last thing, go beyond just the idea of design. Go and be curious about the culture. And I always go back to the guns. What is it? Steel and whatever by Jared Diamond.
Yes, Anne. Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. Great book.
He was so interested in why things happen. And there's always a context for things. And if you can understand that and understand where everything fits, you'll be so much better off.
Yeah. Great words. Thanks, Anne. Mauro, final words here in our last couple of minutes. Guidance for the next generation?
Look, I have a definition for the ideal designer, entrepreneur, business leader, innovator, and it is people in love with people. It's the subtitle of the book, The Power of People in Love with People. There are 3 dimensions of love. The first one is the love for the people we serve, the consumers, the customers, the people out there, really caring about creating something extraordinary for them. Look at them as they were your parents, your friends, your family members, and really create something that is magic, meaningful, relevant for them. The second form of love is the love for what you do, is the passion that we have in what we do every day, is the passion that really gives you the drive to go over any kind of roadblock and difficulties and challenges that are typical of the world, of life in general, and especially if you try to innovate. So you need the love and the passion to really drive your life through all of this. And the third dimension of love is the love for the people surrounding you. This is not a one woman or one man show. This is teamwork. I mean, the only way to really create something meaningful in life is to take others with you in so many different ways. And the best way to take others with you is to care about others. And so we talked today about acts of kindness and generosity and really, sharing your vision, sharing your dream, excite others with your passion and your care for others, bring them with you, and together we can really change the world.
I love it. And great way to end our amazing conversation. It feels a little abrupt after we've had these lovely conversations to say goodbye, but I do want to respect your time and thank you once again, Anne Willoughby, Mauro Porcini. Thank you for joining me, and what a great conversation.
Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Anne. It's really, really been a pleasure for me as well.
That's all for this episode of This is a Prototype, the Design Leadership Podcast. Special thanks to Scott Leach of Brand Speak Communications for his production assistance, and to Graham Barton for his original theme music. I'd love for you to help me grow the audience for this podcast by liking and following it on your favorite podcast platform. And I'd also love your help finding great design leaders for future episodes of the show. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn with your ideas. You can also find out more about my work as a design leader on my website, dougpowell.design. Thanks for listening. Until next time.